So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we're here in a rather wintry scene, and this is just as the weather where I'm at is starting to get a little bit warmer, so it's actually in pretty stark contrast for once. And it is an Elven themed map, but there is actually no Elven factions on the field today, so this has a distinctly Fourth Age sort of vibe to it, where the remnants of the elves hosts a battle and everyone else is sort of fighting within it. It's not really themed either. It could have been if there was a swap of two of the players on each team, at least in a roundabout sort of way. But it's a mostly human with some goblins who have taken up residency within this old elven settlement, and it's going to be a series of orcs, mostly orcs, as well as some men from the south, and some dwarves who are marching alongside them, who I think the dwarves today might be the only faction on the field who are out and out good. It's kind of debatable what the Rhovanion actually are, but I suppose we'll go through the attackers first and foremost, and we may as well start with the dwarves as well. And we've seen them march alongside the orcs quite a lot recently, which is a little bit strange, but Lila is going to be playing as Erebor. Erebor, of course, always going to be useful for their crossbow contingent, and the Ironfoot crossbows are here and obviously marching into the settlement. I mean, a cityscape like this, it's a little bit more tricky because you can't use the walls to your advantage when you get into the settlement itself, and it always tends to be a total uphill struggle. But if you can get the angles right, of course, crossbows can be absolutely devastating in the right hands. One of the most well-rounded units of regular pikes in the game as well are the Ironfoot pikes. So here they are, obviously shielded, well armoured, and that makes them pretty much the ideal anchor for any sort of force as they move forward. Obviously the dwarves don't have access to the same sort of numbers as a few of the other factions do, so they do have to be a little bit careful there, and using this kind of unit can really help shelter them from taking too much damage up close. The Ironfoot warriors with the armour upgrade as well are a very capable regular infantry unit, of course. This is an area where the dwarves tend to do quite well for themselves anyway, and obviously upgrading the armour just makes them that a little bit more efficient. Very good in conjunction with the pikes and the crossbows, not dissimilar actually to the way Isengard handle their business, albeit with a little bit more of a quality focus. We've got the two bodyguard units of Dragon Slayers here, the regular Dragon Slayers of Erebor, which have been in the game ever since the days of Vanilla and are the strongest unit of outright infantry that Erebor have, and they come with armour piercing as well as a shield, which is a little bit of a rarity, but the dwarves do have a tendency to have that in their locker. And then we also have the Dragon Slayers trackers as well, one of two axe thrower bodyguards that the game has to offer, this one being the more defensively orientated. The elves do have access to a more aggressive one, but here of course the damage that those throwing axes can do can be really, really devastating to the defenders. Some miners who are just the closest thing the dwarves have to fodder really. They do have armour piercing, but they do lack the survivability that the rest of the roster has. Speaking of axe throwers, there's plenty of them here as well. The regular axe throwers also shielded, so even though they do have to get closer, archers are not quite the kryptonite to them that they could be to some of the lighter factions in the game. And finally, we've got some Sons of Durin and some Erebor legionaries, so the higher tier regular infantry units that Erebor have, in fewer numbers of course, but they will still be wheeled forwards later in the battle, I'm sure, to good effect. Second attacking army, we have Chuckles playing as Harad. We've got some regular Haradrim spearmen here for the numbers, not up to much in melee, but the Southron Warband do have a bit of armour piercing to help offset their own deficiencies in terms of their defensive stats. We've got the Serpent Camel Archers as well. Interesting choice. I mean, they can be pretty useful for hunting down units of cavalry that do sally out, but in a roundabout sort of way, because they are ultimately horse archers or camel archers first and foremost. So an interesting choice, but it does give them a little bit more mobility. Several units of Muhard Berserkers, who are a cheap unit of good armour piercing, but very, very fragile of course in terms of melee defence and almost total lack of armour. Certainly not dressed for the weather, nor are their fellow Muhards the Beast Hunters, but the Javelins of course mean that you can move them forwards and do a decent amount of damage. They're not quite as cheap as some of like the Orcish Javelins for example, but they're in the same sort of category of relatively entry-level Javelins that can get value pretty easily. A couple of units of regular Haradrim Archers again, which can be useful for at least engaging with other long-range units, but they're not going to be winning any skirmish fights because their defensive abilities and their damage is so poor, but there's quite a lot of them. Southron Pikemen to help anchor the force in place as well, obviously not as good as the equivalent Erebor units, but good enough for their purposes here. Then we start to get into the heavy hitters. I think that's two units of Mumakil actually, which is a big 42? No, yeah, I'm pretty sure the Mumakil have 3 models per unit, and there's 6 of them there, so obviously an interesting risk to take, but potentially devastating, of course. I mean, they have the highest ceiling of Harad units, but they're also, there's no hiding them, and there's no hiding your intent when you bring 2. We've got the Serpent Archers hidden, we've got the Demons of the Desert who are really devastating as well, but you do need to manoeuvre them into the right place. And then some Champions of Nafra and the Trollmen, so an interesting composition there. Foregoing a little bit more in terms of numbers to bring their heavy hitters in melee and their monstrous units. We have Isengard, played by Muffins. He's the player who sent me this battle replay, so a big thank you to him. Half-Orc Spearguard lurking at the front. We also have the Uruk-hai Infantry. You know what you're going to get from Isengard, really, which is a good baseline of quality with decent numbers, and then you've got a few heavy hitters at the high end as well, especially when it comes to dealing damage, which is what the Orcs tend to be all about. Uruk-hai Raiders and Uruk-hai Crossbows, of course. We mentioned the crossbows with regards to Erebor. The same applies to Isengard. The Trolls of the White Hand. Recently we saw the Trolls dealt with pretty well by defenders. We'll see if they can do the same here, but obviously the damage potential of Trolls, especially higher end ones like this, very, very high. Champions of the White Hand will make for a very good anti-cavalry cavalry unit should the defenders want to sally out, and they do have a few factions which do have access to some pretty scary cavalry units, so it makes sense to counteract that preemptively with those. Isengard Ballista, again, the same sort of thing applies to them as with the crossbow, really. If you get a good line of sight, especially the Isengard Ballista can be absolutely devastating, but a settlement like this, if the defenders are savvy, they can set up in positions which will make the Isengard Ballista difficult to use, or at least dangerous to use. We've seen artillery betray their own team quite a lot recently. Uruk-hai Raiders, of course, we've got the pikes as well to help anchor the good quality Uruk-hai and the not so good quality Uruk-hai in place as well. Uruk-hai Reavers not dissimilar to the Muhard Berserkers, albeit maybe, you know, they at least have some scraps of leather on, so they're not going into battle completely shirtless. Got the Uruk-hai Infantry as well, more crossbows. The Berserkers here, however, are, but they of course have multiple HP. Again, a bit of a flash in the pan kind of unit, but it is a pretty bright flash if you can get them up against the right kinds of units. There's a lot of armor piercing here from Isengard actually, so maybe less survivable than your average Isengard force can be, but still. And finally we have Tommy, who is playing as Angmar. Obviously Angmar ever powerful on the attack. We've got Gundabad Guard, as well as the Guardians of Khan Doom with the armor upgrades as well, so that's a very sturdy front line indeed, especially when it comes to close quarters combat. Barrow-wights are hidden away as well. We've seen mass pushing be useful recently. The Blackwatch Legion will be doing that. The Witchers, of course, always dangerous. But also, when you're on a map like this, the snow actually really does make, especially an army that's all in black like Angmar, really pop out. So the defenders have got every chance of spotting them on the way forward. Another artillery piece in the Troll Catapult, which from Scourge Raiders as well, another fast mover that can be used in multiple ways. And then the Hammer Guard and the Black Guard as well. So a few of the attackers are going for multiple really high-end units. It's a 4v4, so they should have the edge in that regard. But moving on to the defenders, and there is a distinctly sort of Eastern men aesthetic, because Umbar, Rhun and the Rhovanion are all here, and King Lazy is going to be playing as Rhun. The Narim, forgot to move them backwards, but I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of a grace period anyway. In terms of long range, of course, Rhun will have an easy advantage over Angmar, but up close things might get a little bit dicey. But Rhune's armor piercing and Rhune's artillery here, the Dragon's Breath, it's been a while since we've seen it, but most of the times we do see it, it is very, very effective. Again, it needs a good line of sight, but it's easier for the defenders to engineer that situation than the attackers, so in theory this should be a little bit more easy to use than the Isengard Ballista. Eastron crossbows, of course, not having a monopoly on crossbows today, the attackers by any means. The Eastrons will be here, armour upgraded, not quite as sturdy as the Isengard or the Erebor ones, of course, but still, they have the advantage of terrain. Gamprim and Scion Rim, a good front line of defensive spears, and then you've got the armour-piercing phalanx of the Gamprim as well, and defending on the sort of the low road, if you will, we've got Carmel's Immortals. Of course, we've got the Flagrim as well, which is going to be very important against Angmar. Angmar, of course, have got the numbers and overall survivability, but the armour-piercing is a bit of an equaliser for Rhun in this situation. Of course, the crossbows can certainly do that as well, and there's plenty of Flagrim here. The Carmel's chosen at the head of the army, and then the powerful Dragon's Wrath crossbows as well. Moving on to the second army, we have Umbar, played by Joey Wan Kenobi. Not going to be too many surprises here, I wouldn't have thought either. Corsairs to pad out the army, but the Blackguards are here, obviously good quality javelins as well. Plenty of the Umbar Axe Guard, and really the Harad are the only non-armoured attacking faction, so it makes sense for Umbar to dip into these guys, upgrading their armour as well, just making them a little bit more survivable. More standard Corsairs and more Blackguards. We've got the fully upgraded Balagaya Pikemen as well. Again, anchoring their forces in place, so we've got some Footmen too. Harbingers of Castamere, very strong unit of two-handed swordsmen. Warlords of Umbar, as well. Some cavalry, I mean, they need to be careful because of all the cavalry the attackers have. And then we've got some Alcarondas Legion back here as well. Probably a few hidden units as well. Rangers and Corsair crossbows and the like. Now we have the Rhovanion, played by Red Knight, the Rhovanion nobles. Again, the same applies to them as to the warlords. If you are going to sally out, you need to be careful, even more so for the Rhovanion, because they are a lancer unit. The warlords do have the bonus against cavalry at least, which could allow them to fight their way out of some engagements. Tribal levy spears for the numbers. Again, the Rhovikin phalanx, so pretty much every faction today in their own ways seems to have access to a strong unit of phalanx infantry, and the Rhovikin are pretty much along the same sort of lines as the Erebor forces, albeit actually a little bit higher tier than them, but obviously more expensive and less numerous as well. Tribal berserkers, the damage dealers of the Rhovanion in melee, unsurprising to see a pretty heavy dip into them from Red Knight. The Rhovikin nobles, very similar actually to the Carmels chosen in terms of what they offer. Rhovikin archers, again good quality heavy archers, and Rhovikin hoplons as well. So they've got the good quality heavy units, but actually the tribal units in terms of dealing damage, the slingers and the skirmishers are going to be just as important, I think. And then finally we have the goblins, who have broken from their fellow orcs, and they are going to be on the defence, hidden playing as them. A couple of units of Moria Spearguard, armour piercing on them. Again, another force that has crossbows. We've got the White Turret Fearmongers, we've got some standard halberdiers as well, so again, plenty of phalanx infantry. We've got the Mangonel, or the Goblin War Engine as it's known. I mean, we've seen artillery be a bit of a problem for its wielders, and there's no artillery more likely to do that than the Mangonel if it's used in the wrong manner, so we'll see how well the War Engine can do. We've got more Moria Halberdiers, plenty of trolls as well, cave trolls, and some drummers, which are a bit of a necessity to keep your goblins pointing in the right direction. That's still the War Engine crew, and the Drake Broodlings, who can be used to break up advances. Again, as a mass pushing unit, they're pretty unique in comparison to the Great Shields of Mordor and Angmar, but if you keep them moving, they can be a real pain. Probably some hidden units around here as well. The goblins have their fair share of those after all. Anyway, I'll make a bit of a cut because the runic player still needs to retreat some of his units, and there's still a fair amount of open space. The attackers will need to decide what it is and how they are going to deal with the situation, but I will rejoin when the battle is about to get underway. Well, talk about threading the needle. That happened so quickly that I wasn't even able to unpause in time, but the troll catapult there managing to get a pretty perfect hit onto the defending Rhun with the ideal angle, albeit you can never really depend on artillery to get that. They may not have even been going for the archers, they may have been going instead for the Dragon's Breath, which is on Overwatch over here, as Angmar start to make their way forwards, but a fortuitous start for the attackers as they begin their march. The Orcish-led attack on what is mostly an evil men defence, remember? Yeah, we've also got Isengard moving forward here. Isengard did also try to get their ballista into a position to shoot into a defensive line that was up here, but it was spotted pretty quickly by the defenders, and they ended up breaking off and moving their defences. While over here it's going to be the Orcs of the Misty Mountains that are going to be defending against Erebor and a bit of Harad as well. Crossbows, a line of spears, plenty of trolls, and the ever-dangerous artillery, which is going to be a very big fixture in this battle. I think we've already seen with the opening salvos from Angmar there, with the artillery still doing its thing, but obviously you've got the Dragon's Breath, you've got the Isengard Ballista, you've got the Mangonel, plenty of unique artillery pieces to be had. This is an interesting engagement. It was interesting that Rhun decided to send forward their line infantry as a response to this. The Scourge Raiders presumably getting close enough to start throwing their projectiles, but neither are they in any real rush to actually retreat from this situation. Again, with only one unit of infantry and with some supporting spears, you could just try and use the mass of the wargs, I suppose, to break this front line, but surely as soon as some of the runic reinforcements make their way forward, all of that changes up pretty significantly. Rhun now also in a good position. Barrow-wight slowly shambling their way forwards as well. Now the Scourge Raiders elect to leave with archer support and extra infantry now arriving to the front. We'll continue. Meanwhile, Isengard have got a little bit further to go. I mean, Isengard can punch deep into the defensive position over here, but that obviously means that the defenders have got all of the motivation in the world to keep reinforcing where Isengard are attacking, so it is a little bit of an interesting call, because I think the outer part is going to be where we see the initial actions from the attackers, try and claim some more map control and make the battlefield little bit more contained so that they can sync up their attacks a little bit easier, whereas if Isengard overextend, that could be trouble for them. Well, Harad still fairly far over there. I mean, they've got to march through quite a lot of hostile terrain and easy sniping spots before they can attack as well. Presumably why they're hanging back just a little bit. Goblin infantry hiding. Maybe getting in the way of what was the camel riders. Plenty of goblins, of course. You're not going to be able to finish them off with any sort of haste. Well, now the Umbar guard standing alone. Heavy armour and big shields, of course, all of which stolen from the dwarves mostly. So the NIMRODEL electing not to attack. There's not much of the flagrum left, however. It would be their armour piercing that would be carrying the day in this particular matchup. The Carmel's Immortals are going to have the wherewithal to be able to get through the Umbar guard's defences on their own, but Rhun still have plenty of reinforcements they can commit. I mean, certainly when the Barrow Wights arrive on the front line, it becomes a little bit of a tricky proposition for the Easterlands to fight. There's no real way of dealing with them quickly outside of maybe using the artillery, but I don't think Rhun would be too eager for that. Being in that position is also putting it in the view of the troll catapults we make our way across the rocky hilltops. The Barrow Wights also helping with Isengard's attack by the looks of it. Were firing. One rider fell, but shovels the white hand. Worth a little bit more than your common foot soldier, for sure. Still pretty comfortable over here for Umbar. But over here, attack's still not beginning either. Cave Troll Drummers on the hilltop over there. I'm not entirely sure what they're doing over here. Maybe a misclick and the player has simply not noticed that they're there. The radius will be enough to boost the morale of all of these goblins, but we'll see, I suppose. So yeah, still the only attack ongoing. Rhun against Angmar. I've got many of them pointing the wrong way, which is a little bit strange. Usually that's the sort of thing that you see with phalanx units rather than this. A spearman. Immortals, though, this is where they should get decent value, I suppose. I mean, their damage dealing capabilities against something like the Umbar guard, like we said, not exactly high end, but again, in pure melee battles like this, they are going to be a little bit better than your average entry level troop. Meanwhile, Cummel's chosen taking a few glancing blows. Well, the Dragon's Breath now firing. Mostly hitting Snaga archers. I would imagine they were trying to go after the Barrow Wights, but I mean, it's better than hitting nothing. Indeed, they've absolutely carved through that unit, so what little ranged presence Angmar do have already being severely curtailed. They actually get another shot here, and it's kind of a similar situation to the NIMRODEL at the hands of the Troll Catapult in the opening moments of the battle. That the Dragon's Breath, or the Barrow Wights I should say, aren't moving forward, to be honest. Nothing really to be gained by having them back there. But I did notice the Dragon's Breath, the classic Medieval 2 problem of artillery sliding off hills. You'll need to be careful. Still over here, Harad not too keen on the idea of moving forward. He's testing the front line with those camel archers, still remains the only moment of genuine confrontation over here. The Goblin crossbows falling away as well. I mean, it does look as though they're going to... It's more of a token effort over here. Harad have only got a small part of their army that will push through here if left undefended, but for the most part, I think they are going to attack down 3 lanes. With Isengard eventually going to move their way up here again. NIMRODEL firing in there, the Rhovanion also losing a couple of their riders, but so far no great shakes for either side. Now we'll have superior range, but I mean, this is where the Isengard armour should stand them in pretty good stead. Some slingers on the way forwards as well. I mean, Alcarondas Legion, a decent enough target for the crossbows. Taking losses, but certainly not quickly enough to prevent a pretty good salvo there. Flank. Several of the Umbar infantrymen do fall, but they will be forced into a retreat as the warlords move forward. I mean, they may as well carry through with their charge because there's no anti-cavalry close enough by. Bit of friendly fire perhaps from the Easterling archers, mind you, but warlords of Umbar made a pretty stern stuff. Want to leave with the arrival of the champions of the White Hand, however. The opening testing of the waters over there. Still the most significant fight being this one, but even this one is starting to cool off a little bit with still the Carmel's Immortals and what very little remains of that unit of Flag Grim, the only ones still holding this particular position for Rhun. Yeah, the Umbar Guard holding up pretty well in this fight, but even here, I mean, Angmar haven't committed forward tons of their units. They're not going to want to either with the Dragon's Breath looming large, the rest of their army waiting for its opportunity, so and the artillery is dictating the pace of things here. Goblin War Engine, a little bit more of a presence over here now, getting ready, setting the table for an attack perhaps. Dwarven Miners, Serpent Camel Archers as well. Being the ones to move forward a little bit more, revealing the Goblin Infantry once more. Still fairly stretched. We've got here Serpent Camel Archers actually being used to simply charge in. I mean, why not? The Goblin Infantry are so poor that any sort of cavalry unit with its mass is going to have the ability to do some pretty good damage. But there's two layers of this Goblin Infantry, which makes setting up an attack and then executing it quickly kind of difficult when you've got these two little speed bumps in the way. I mean, yes, they're not going to do much to your units, but it's not Goblin Infantry you need to be concerned about when facing the Misty Mountains. There's going to be stuff like their crossbows, their trolls, and in this case their artillery. The War Engine could be really, really devastating in this sort of situation as well. As the Moria Spear Guard get onto the front lines also. And for axe throws, I mean, certainly the quality and the durability of some of those Erebor units is going to be key moving forward, you would have thought, for the attackers' chances there. Barrow Whites still not too interested in moving in over here. And Rhun and Umbar, the confluence of both of their forces. Rhovanion as well, who can play a little bit more of a supporting role, to be fair, if their lane is not going to be focused in any great way by the attackers. Palace at the back of the settlement over here, although I have a feeling this is certainly not going to be the final stand. Rhun would have to hold on to this attacking lane throughout the entirety of the battle, and I don't think they're going to do that. Angmar are a tough cookie at the best of times, and Rhun are having to spread their focus a little bit. And the Vanguard once again moving in. I mean, they will find the Flag Grim a little bit more of a problem. They will have the damage that the Carmel's Immortals do not. That armor piercing of theirs. That's where the Barrow Whites may come into play. Still the Carmel's Immortals as well, so they haven't actually finished them off, they're still just moving in. There goes the Dragon's Breath, managing to get a good hit there on the Barrow Whites, but it's only the projectile at the end which is a guaranteed kill, so ripping through the units like that does mean that the Barrow Whites can survive it. But that will damage them fairly significantly. As soon as their hit points are gone, the Barrow Whites are a genuinely terrible unit, so is their one and only selling point as the Carmel's Immortals get charged into by the Scourge Raiders. The green light for the Rim to start opening up on them as well, but I mean that will finish off the Carmel's Immortals. It's a slightly asymmetric way of doing it, but the situation is in hand. Meanwhile, the Dwarven Miners easily able to deal with standard Goblin Infantry, of course. The Moria Spear Guard made of slightly sterner stuff, however. And the numbers are going to be the main problem here. One unit of Dwarven Miners is not enough to deal with this many goblins. Seems certain. The Gobbos. And for axe throwers, one of the units anyway throwing their projectiles in, which is an interesting call. I mean, none of these units for the Misty Mountains are especially dangerous, but do a little bit of extra damage. They will need to get some extra infantry on the front line fairly quickly, however, otherwise this attack will just completely falter. Sounds like Warband were in the background, maybe mustering to do such a thing. Still a movement here, but then Angmar and Rhun still the most active participants in the battle thus far. That unit of Narvrim that got hit so severely early on has been providing fairly consistent overwatch. It's interesting that we're seeing almost 1 or 2 units against another 1 or 2 units pretty much exclusively so far. Not entirely sure that's going to be to the Flag Room's benefit. I mean, if it was just the Gundabad Guard, yes, but with Barrow-wights here, that's going to be a far more difficult thing. Scion Rim are right here. More defensive unit, very much the equivalent really of the Gundabad Guard, only a higher quality version. Very, very tough unit. The Flag Room still, in fact, they're moving backwards. That makes sense if they want to deploy their artillery. It means that they're minimising friendly fire. Barrow-wights will be able to move through the gaps in the now very depleted unit of Flag Room. So I'm not entirely sure what's to be gained. We're better off committing some more reinforcements to the front line here in the room, because this unit of Flag Room has been basically run over and it hasn't really given you any sort of value, not the sort of thing that defenders can often absorb. Common infantry. As I mean, warriors as well. I mean, they will be significantly tougher than the Dwarven miners. Maximers as well, but thinking better of it perhaps, or are they going to charge in? They're thinking about doing it, but they're not actually doing it. Very cagey affair so far from... I guess the attackers have to be the one to dictate the pace of things, so... The ball is very much in their court. The defenders have set things up how they think is best, and it's given the attackers pause, I suppose. War machines being the primary reason for that, I think. Umbar there. I mean, to be fair to the attackers, this engagement over here, which is the only one that has been consistent, has been going in their favour. So perhaps a slower approach is called for. They want those Scourge Raiders dead, don't they? They've targeted them every time they've come into view. They are very dangerous. Lights there, meanwhile. Again, even using the artillery to target them down. Artillery is a very high-ticket item for you to use against such a thing, I think, but no matter. To be a distinct possibility. Seems certain still for the Flag Rim. I mean, this does go to show the awkward nature of fighting Barrow-wights. Crossbows could be something that you could use to put a decent effect there. As they're reloading the Dragon's Breath, but they think better of it once again. And over here, Warlords charging in, the Rhovanion nobles as well, trying to 2v1 the champions of the White Hand, but those giant two-handed weapons of the champions should be enough to see them through against these two cavalry units, so I'm not entirely sure. I mean, presumably trying to force the crossbows into a retreat once more. Still another Rim firing away. Still in range as well. Here. Again, we're slowly seeing things ratchet up now, I think. 9-foot warriors now pushing forward. Beginning the attack once again. The armour piercing of the Moria Spear Guard will be good, but they're still far outclassed by this Dwarven infantry. It's only the one unit moving forwards once again. And then, however, we do have Harad slowly moving the rest of their army forwards, maybe repositioning some of the rest of their army from over there, Southron pikemen joining this detachment of their force, and now maybe ready to open up another front with Umbar the target. Meanwhile, both artillery pieces really doing their thing. Although in that case, a bit of friendly fire from the Angmar troll catapult. Once again, a case of artillery betrayal. It's fairly common these days. Managing to get some glancing blows on the Scion Rim, but actually Angmar's attack now pretty much done with. I mean, these Barrow Wights are kind of behind enemy lines at this point, but a nice hit there by the Dragon's Breath, cutting them down to size. So they'll have to start again at their beginnings, Angmar, just like Erebor on the other side. So that's a good win actually for Rhun. A bit of extra help from Umbar now as well with some Angmar. The armor piercing will definitely be appreciated, I'm sure. While taking the lead on this defensive position as well, Harad threatening to begin pressuring. And for axe throwers and some of the archers from Harad starting to try and put some pressure on the supporting units in behind. If they wanted to, the Rhovanion archers could easily have the beating of Harad archers in an archer duel, but they'll be wanting to use their ammunition on something a bit juicier, looking at goblin infantry moving forward, so trying to make do with some lower end units. In fact, but if they used all their ammunition, if they haven't, it's been a mistake to put into my own. If they have, it just gives them some extra numbers on the front line, a bit of support for the Ironfoot warriors already committed. Both sides, the Bulge champions charging in here. Both sides eager to conserve strength where they're able. The War Engine is in a pretty devastating position if it plays ball. Bulge champions, probably the most aggressive in terms of lances down and charging of all of the Orcish cavalry, really. Most of the others are designed to be a little bit more of a melee monster. Bulge champions can still do that job, but they're a little bit more slanted towards getting those hefty charges off. Dwarven miners, but the Ironfoot warriors taking some pretty hefty blows there, and as a result, the axe throwers pulling back again, so again having to reconsider what it is they're actually doing. Over here, again another hit from the artillery, this time hitting enemy troops from Angmar's catapult. That was a pretty significant hit as well, so I mean, the Umbar Axguard moved forward to support Rhun, and they've borne the brunt of the catapult's fury as soon as they did. Unfortunately for them, their armour upgrades are going to be nowhere near enough to withstand that kind of damage. Scourge Raiders using their throwing axes, and they're also being targeted immediately by these strong crossbows as a result of that. So, I mean, finally I think the Scourge Raiders will be dealt with, but I mean, Rhun have put a great deal into doing so, so whether it's actually worth it remains to be seen. Little remains of the Snagar archers as well, another victim of an artillery piece on the field today. The Whites still fighting away. Always a difficult unit to finish off, of course, as we can see. I'm not going to move in just yet. I mean, they only have so many troops that they can. And now, Mangonel raining down some death immediately, causing the Southron warband to become shaken. There's poison projectiles being used now as well, so I can only imagine the morale situation over on this side of the battlefield is going to deteriorate at a rate of knots. Berserkers ready to move in for a bit of extra armour piercing. The Sons of Durin for a lot of extra armour piercing. Notice in the background as well, you do have the drummers up here. I mean, to be fair, you don't actually see the exact radius as you do in a game like Warhammer for aura effects, and I don't actually know how much it would extend. I mean, it looks cinematic. Trolls having a great time watching the battle and banging away on the drums. Now the Rhovanion archers start to use their arrows. Starting to heat up there, certainly. Meanwhile, over here, that's been a bit of an interesting call. I mean, it has clearly been pretty costly for Isengard's infantry with their crossbows strewn about the floor. I think in terms of cavalry, though, they've been on the better end of this engagement, so I don't know where that leaves you from a value proposition. Cavalry has been useful in a few sieges that we've seen of late, so net gain for the attackers, perhaps. Some crossbows is always going to be a little bit of a problem area, though, perhaps. Umbar Axguard on the march forwards now as well. Very nice hit there from the Dragon's Breath once again. Good and bad guard this time. Recipient of the damage. A little bit of friendly fire onto the barrel lights, but following through and hitting enemy units as well. So I mean, clearly the artillery has been extremely influential on this fight. It's ebbed and flowed as well between Rhun and Angmar. Both sides have been in the ascendancy at different moments. Now it's Rhun, but when that is the case, when you've got more of your presence there, it just makes the job of the opposing artillery just a little bit easier. Certainly less costly, or potentially costly, for their own units in the vicinity. Warrior Halberds now taking the lead on this front line. Again, things have started to cool off a little bit in this engagement. Rhovanion archers reloading and preparing to fire once more. Archers, they do have those poison projectiles, and that is enough. I mean, the Misty Mountains are going to be the most vulnerable to that sort of warfare, so Harad's poison arrows doing their thing. The Goblin War Engine could yet prove to be the bane of the Goblin's existence as well. Still trying to finish off. Very little remains of the Barrow Whites. Umbar and Escalating with their damage will certainly help to facilitate that. Would now move the flag rim. Sniper archers shaken and fleeing the scene. Can't Doom on the way forward. And of course, we've yet to see Angmar's truly devastating units. In many ways, we've seen certainly some resilient units of theirs, but not ones that are capable of dealing a huge amount of damage. That will come later in the fight, apparently. High Raiders and Pikemen, I mean, still, the battle wears on, and I would only imagine that at some point the attackers are going to really go for it, simply because they've been conservative up to now. The miners trying to circumvent the halberdier position and succeeding. Not good for the goblins over on this side of the line. Goblin infantry will help to reinforce again the lowliest of both sides' infantry. Of course, the dwarven miners individually significantly stronger than the goblin infantry still, but the first unit in both sides' roster still 26k frames in, and this is still the sort of unit or units which are leading the way. Well, Harad are now moving forwards, testing the Umbar waters. With the cavalry there, I mean, the warlords of Umbar won't want to get involved in a ground war against the Southron warband. Not a good value proposition at all, especially with the damage they've already taken at the hands of Isengard's wargs. Fully upgraded Belagaya footmen. Defensively far stronger than the Southron warband. Good position formation-wise, however, in the armour piercing. Numbers of the Southrons actually doing a pretty decent job here. Again, more basic Umbar forces. Pretty intimidating looking pike line there as well. Isengard still far and away the most casualties on the field. Still belongs to the Runic and Angmar front line. Sniper archers now moving forward. Finally, the Barrow Whites are being laid low. Thinking about moving forward once again. As soon as they do, of course, the artillery will be the problem. The Rhun need to be very careful not to lose one of their artillery pieces to the terrain. The sheer strength of these three Easterlings that it's going to have to do to push it up the hill immediately. They're making a bit of a meal of this. Could prove to be a really significant moment in the battle as well, because I don't know if they would be able to withstand Angmar without the Overwatch support from the Dragon's Breath. Serpent Archer's been fought again. Another example of the two sides pulling away from one another. Here, starting to pick up once more. More of the Southrons moving in step with the dwarves. Levy slingers now being committed. There's the projectiles in the Rhovanion may be fairly low tier, but they're also responsible for a decent proportion of damage that their army can do. Junction with the Misty Mountains, what a strange combination of factions that is. Same is true of the attackers, Harad and Erebor against the Rhovanion and the Misty Mountains. Still the drummers over there in the distance. There's plenty of reinforcements that can be committed forward in the event that the attackers do decide that now is the time. Heavy spears. Some routing units being mobbed by the waiting Harad infantry as well. Here Uruk-hai crossbows once again. I mean, certainly not changing tactic over here, are they? No, the Isengard ballista has moved forward. Potentially devastating, especially like White Uruk Fearmongers and Alcaron Das Legion. Those are good units to be getting out the way with artillery. That does mean they're going to have to move as well and potentially leave a little bit more space for an all-out infantry attack. Is that going to be the future of things over here? There's no responding artillery here for the Isengard ballista. It's not ideal positionally for them. But still, they've managed to salvage the Dragon's Breath as well, have Rhun. Now moving forward, a rumour kill. Harad sending over some support over here. The Orc fellas, again, the only ones being moved in. I mean, they're far from resilient enough to deal with the situation on their own, but if they follow through with infantry after the rumour kill, cause some havoc, this could be a well-executed move. Dragon's Breath scything through the Guardians of Khardu, the Umbar Axguard fleeing from the rumour kill. It's not going to work, unfortunately, for them, so I mean, what will they do? I mean, the Gamprim can do good damage to the rumour kill if they manage to land hits on them before the rumour kill have already left melee range. Again, maybe trying to interrupt the Dragon's Breath. Angmar's infantry now moving forward. Not as swift as would be ideal, but that would be the reason why they would not be eager to commit their infantry in a giant blob. Dragon's Breath's damage dealing capabilities still. Sapphire Bladesmen throwing their javelins way up into the air. Wisest of moves. What's going on here? Tribal Levy Slingers. Still throwing their missiles. Again, not necessarily with the ideal arc of fire. Still miners alive on the front line. Still a couple of infantry alive on the front line. It goes to show how quickly they're dealing damage to each other. Not too eager to reopen proceedings against Umbar over here just yet. Meanwhile, Isengard are now committing infantry forward. The Uruk-hai Raiders punching in, going up against the Belagaya Footman. It's the one unit for now, but another one following in. Again, the Umbar defensive prowess should be enough to deal with the standard Uruk-hai for sure. Maybe something with the pikes and get their Berserker class units into good effect. That's where Umbar could start to struggle a bit. White Uruk Fearmongers moving in to meet the challenge of the Raiders. Trolls of the White Hand ambling their way forwards as well. Heavy slingers are there. Scion Rim. Rhovakin archers, and then there's the Nar Rim also. The Isengard Ballista, I mean, potentially a real problem. Going after the Rhovakin phalanx as well, so that's a good choice of target. Artillery once again being fairly key. Trolls of the White Hand could be really, really devastating when they get committed forward if there aren't enough infantry numbers for the defenders to be able to keep them in check. That's really what they're thinking about. And they do need to be a bit careful of units like the Tribal Berserkers. They could be very, very deadly in Arch as well. So Isengard It's probably the first wholesale commitment of units that we've seen, but I think Angmar are not too far behind in those terms. Blackwatch Legion have moved forward. And with this many numbers, all of a sudden the runic defence looks to be kind of in shambles. They're going to have to try and dump their artillery ammunition as quickly as they're able, try and get as many kills as they possibly can. Carmel's chosen being overrun. Balkor's Sapphire Bladesmen will suffer the same fate as well, presumably. They might be able to finish off the Blackwatch Legion before they fall, but the value proposition overall for the defenders here is not really there. Does that mean that over here we're seeing a similar sort of commitment of resources? Kind of. Ratcheting things up from a dwarven perspective as well, with Ironfoot Pikes and more warriors now on the front line. Not quite as much maybe as Isengard or Angmar, but still trending in the right direction. Tribal Levy Slingers defeat seeming certain for them as well. Gobbo crossbows. Goblin War Engine. Of reinforcements here from a defending perspective, from an attacking perspective. I mean, when you're going up against the goblins and you're the dwarves, you kind of know that you're not going to have limitless numbers. Rhune's general falls. I mean, Rhune's army in general has not got many places to go, because I mean, Isengard, if they manage to seize territory over here, they can't really retreat. So what will they do? Again, committing piecemeal into these engagements hasn't really been to their benefit, I think. Certainly not to their infantry's benefit. Maybe you could say that it has benefited their artillery, but has it benefited their artillery enough for it to have been worthwhile? Angmar still have another wave that they can send forward, although they themselves are not really in the rudest of health. Guardians of Kharndoom, very accomplished on the front line, especially with that armour upgrade. They've become one of the more well-rounded units of line infantry in the game, not just among the Orcish factions. Gamperin trying to sort of hold things down on their own with plenty of missiles. Corsair Blackguards could crack through that jet black plate armour quite nicely, and I mean, the Dragon's Wrath crossbows are certainly capable of doing that as well. How much ammunition are they truly going to be able to utilise, however? Glancing blow only on the Corsair Blackguards, out of ammunition, strong crossbows. Desperate times. Isengard, meanwhile, how have things been going over here for them? They have sent forward the trolls, the berserkers in close proximity as well, the Nazkai, so yeah, this is definitely an all-in kind of moment. I don't think the defenders are in too good of a position to deal with this. I mean, over here they're doing okay. Alcorn's Legion, with the support of those fearmongers, pushed in a little bit, but with the arrival of the pikes and the barrow-wights, always going to be a very difficult combination to get out of the way. Rhovanion archers, not the most damaging unit of archers in the world either. Any support in this sort of situation is good support, however. Those trolls are going to be a real problem though. In behind enemy lines, they're going to be able to feast upon these isolated units of skirmishers if they so choose, or maybe charge into the back of the front line. It'll certainly be enough to send units like Corsairs fleeing, and then it's very difficult to reverse that kind of momentum. Once that's the path the battle is on, albeit that is the Isengard general, skewered by one of the Scion Rim. Uruk-hai infantry though pouring forwards. Here, again, starting to ratchet things up over here from both sides as well, really. The War Engine is yet to start getting involved again, but I mean, tribal berserkers on the front line, they'll do quite nicely against the dwarven units. Again, stuff like Sons of Durin going to be a real problem for the Rhovanions' Rhovanion units. Marching archers, plenty of numbers as well, plenty of fodder for the attackers that they can commit forwards. Ironfoot crossbows trying to find an angle of their own. I mean, they could quite nicely hit the tribal berserkers. I think that is their target as well. Phalanx troops moving forward, however, the Moria Halberdiers. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, with Isengard's progress, that has
spurred Harad into action as well against this Umbar front line. Umbar having to commit reinforcements down here to contain things. I mean, a big part of the problem always going to be the boomer kill. If you're having to defend with a bit of a skeleton crew like Umbar were over here, elephant class units are going to be the bane of your existence. The upside for Umbar really is that most of the infantry that Harad have over here are their south fronts and such, so not the most resilient. Really, the Serpent Archers are the only tanky unit you would suggest. Meanwhile, Rhun's still putting up a defensive effort over here. In fact, coming out on top of things over here by the looks of things. Many of Angmar's forces are fleeing. The Hammer Guard and the Witches and the Blackguard, so all of the high-end Angmar units are here. But the problem is when they're isolated like this, it's very easy to see where they are. So they can be focused down by whatever support Rhun have left, which could well include the dangerous Dragon's Wrath crossbows, although they are firing at fleeing men. That's the sort of waste which you can ill afford at this point, considering the margins. Although, Angmar may not have to worry about their elite units being focused down, because they are going to get a huge amount of support from Isengard, and this is... I mean, Rhun are pretty cooked in this sort of situation, aren't they? They're getting around this fact. High infantry. Moving forwards, I mean, the downhill charge, a little bit of extra value, but at this point, these small victories in the face of a rather large defeat are the best that the defenders can actually hope for. Try to make their way forwards quickly. Don't know if the Dragon's Breath still have ammunition or what. I mean, Angmar move forward maybe a little bit early. It's going to give the Dragon's Breath crossbows a chance to try and thin the numbers of these Angmar elites. There's no retreat, so you may as well just keep firing away. Trolls are on the way. Dragon's Breath getting into place to maybe get one last shot. If they could hit the Trolls with the White Hand, that would be something. Something as they go down swinging. Hammer Guard took a bit of a mauling at the hand of those Dragon's Wrath crossbows, and they will continue to do so. Strong crossbows won't last too long against the Blackguard. Certainly won't with the arrival of the champions of the White Hand barrelling into the back of them. The Hammer Guard trying to force their way through the front line and succeed. The Breath crew is pretty accomplished at stealth though, so they won't be the easiest ones to bring down either. So Archers firing away with their poison projectiles. Great groupings in the backfield. Boomer kill. Combination of Corsair crossbows and perhaps the Corsair Blackguards engaged in melee, but dealt with reasonably quickly. But the Boomer kill already did their job with giving Harad a bit of go forward against the Umbar defence. Archers of Casimir, I mean, committing units to these sorts of engagements is pretty bold, considering the fact that there's not really much of a defence over here at all, and as soon as Isengard turn around, they're going to be able to surround you if you're not careful. Maybe the thinking here is with Isengard trying to finish off Rhun, Umbar want to try and finish off this Haradrim splinter force as quickly as they can. There's also a little bit of an attack going on over here, at least testing. Haradrim Spearmen just keeping Umbar honest, making sure they can't fully focus on the Dwarven-led attack over here on the right-hand side. Bolg's champions charging in, doing a good job here, the defenders. I don't know, we may have missed some hits from the Goblin War engine, but so far they've done pretty damn well. And the defenders need this as a victory, because elsewhere on the battlefield they don't really fancy their chances. Iron pikes are there, still some reinforcements further down the hill, close enough to really make a genuine impact on proceedings. Erebor legionaries and more serious dwarven units are arriving, but Trolls and Whiter and Fearmongers are before them, so even they are going to struggle a bit. Or are they going to try and retreat? I mean, they probably should, beyond this circular structure over here, so they can consolidate their position a bit. Looks to be what's going on, but Angmar's Legion being left behind, and the Harad is still down there. So champions of Nafarat are in here, that's for sure. Harad's heaviest hitters, and they will able to sweep aside the Alcarondas Legion. Isengard, I mean, Corsair crossbows looking like they still have ammunition and having to be used as a rear guard again. Calls into question the decision to charge down and try and attack Harad a moment ago, really, when perhaps they should have been looking to retreat slightly earlier. Lights. Infantry, so yeah, Isengard moving forward. I mean, their attack seeming pretty decisive. They and Angmar managing to get the better of this side of the settlement ultimately. It could end up being a 2-2 kind of affair, however, if the Rhovanion and the Misty Mountains are able to see things over the line over here, because they have had the better of it, I think, but maybe not quite to the same extent as the attackers on the other side of the settlement, and this isn't going to help matters. Charging with a phalanx unit into a very stout line of dwarven pikes. Spearguard, a player admitting defeat. I would assume that is a Rhun, given the situation is what it is. Finally finishing them off. Angmar don't have much left, to be fair, and without that Isengard support, there's a case for saying that Rhun might have been able to see themselves over the line there. Would have depended largely, I think, on the use of the Witches maybe for Angmar. That could have turned things back in their favour pretty substantially, and we'll never know now, because Isengard made that a non-event. Remaining defenders on this side of the settlement are that unit of Alcarondas Legion, who have lasted longer than most, I think, would have in a situation against a purely armour-piercing section, really, of the Harad front line. Muhards and Champions of Natharas and the like. A few Harad archers in there as well. Continuing to pursue Trollmen of Harad as well, so still with plenty of their heavy hitters. That may end up being a bit of a point of difference as well. They've got lots of high-end damage dealers left still, the attackers. For the defenders, they've still got some high-end units, but a little bit more defensive perhaps. The Rhovikin nobles, all well and good as long as you've got the ability to actually slay your foes. Also fencers, a bit of cavalry perhaps. Pikes.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Fleeing back down the hill, White Oak Fearmonger's not here in high enough numbers anymore, and Dwarven infantry numbers starting to look a little bit more favourable for the attackers over here, so the last period of the battle really you would suggest that the attackers are looking pretty good to go on to claim the win here. 9-foot warriors, the Bolgs champions. A good amount of damage on those lancers, but I don't know if there's enough of them, and also considering the condensed nature of how a siege tends to be late game, I don't know if they're going to have the ability, especially with all the anti-cavalry that Erebor and Isengard brings to the table. This is the problem as well. The high ground actually belongs to the attackers over on this side, and they're going to make immediate good use of it with their Uruk-hai crossbowmen. That's going to be a real problem for those Rhovikin. Armour and shields, well and good, but those bolts are going to be a nasty, nasty thing for them to deal with. And the problem is, what do? Do they retreat back behind cover? If they do, it gives far more room for the attacking infantry to make the battlefield as big as possible, and that's not something the defenders can really afford either. What's that crossbowman? Champions, 21 of them remaining. There's not a huge amount of the dwarves left, in all fairness. Some Erebor legionaries have still got the Dragon Slayer's trackers back down there, so again another example of something a little special saved for late on. That is the Mangonel, and responding kind to the crossbows. We managed to get hits. I don't know whether the value proposition is still so good for the attackers by posting themselves up there that they're going to have to take it. A bit of responding fire from the Corsair crossbows as well, but again this is the sort of unit that you probably will need for dealing with some of the attackers' heavy hitting infantry. match 22, you have to deal with those crossbows somehow, but in so doing you may be expending resources that will leave you wide open for bullying at the hands of the attacking elites. Huge amount of bodies on the floor. The frame is slightly dropping every time we go over here. Berserkers. Seems certain only military genius will win this battle. It's starting to look that way. Something like the Mangonel getting some absolutely devastating hits, maybe. A lot of these units, Tribal Berserkers, are damaging good functional infantry, but nothing necessarily that will do the kind of damage. Still those drummers as well. I mean, that could be an interesting place for a final stand. This is the highest position on the battlefield, this little shrine at the top almost. It's also such a small area that you wouldn't really want to engage with Medieval 2's legendary pathfinding. Legionaries defeat a distinct possibility still. Hands of these tribal berserkers, another example of a small engagement going the way of the defenders perhaps, but the larger engagement is probably not going to be so kind. Barrage of archers firing away at those tribal levy slingers. I mean, why not? A bit of extra value. What on earth? Where did that come from? Was that the Mangonel? I guess it must have been. That must have been a looping shot. I mean, the Mangonel is kind of known for its somewhat questionable accuracy. That was threading the needle in something. Teams of the desert, there goes the Harad giant, charged by the Bolix champions. Interesting place for the general to be down here on this low ground. I mean, escaping into the open field for the Drake Broodlings and the defending lance cavalry is a very good thing for them, because I mean, so much of their damage dealing potential is bound up in these units, and being trapped behind their defensive lines would have not been to their benefit, but like this is where they can start to claw some value back, so perhaps not all is lost. They're going to need to get a lot of work done. I think Harad see the situation, so they're going to move their units back. I'm a little bit surprised that they haven't got things underway in terms of an infantry assault over here, to be honest. Still moving some of their units a little bit closer, perhaps. I mean, the Isengard Ballista is in a very scary looking position here. If you thought the crossbows were bad, then the Isengard Ballista is going to really double down on that bad news for you as a defender. Get into a good enough position. Reloading, so the answer would appear to be yes. Looping those shots high. That is fortunate, however, getting a nice hit there on the Witch-Run Blackguard and killing off a good number of them. More of that from the Mangonel and more pressure from that cavalry. It's going to have to be the way that this battle is won for them. I think the dwarves are waiting for the attack to begin on the other side, because they don't have the luxury of as much numbers as Isengard. Mostly Isengard, to be fair. Angmar's force is more of a supporting measure at this point. Isengard and Harad are the more numerous of the forces, so Erebor just waiting until that happens so that they can commit without their smaller force being focused down by something like the Mangonel. Already seen can be a bit of a problem. Tron Catapult now moving forwards. There's some infantry testing the mortars. Attacking artillery now as well. Scything through the slingers, just getting a bit of extra value. Could be key. Phalanx shifting around, all of Umbar going out into the open field, all the cavalry looking to put some pressure on the dwarves. Means the Mangonel is going to be needed to be pointed firmly in this direction. Slayer is actually going to win this fight in the end. Only 17 of them. Small victories can add up. And that's certainly the sort of thing which will be good for Axtra. Is getting left behind. I'm a little bit surprised these guys are so far out, but I mean, they're surely going to get charged as isolated as they are and finished off. Well, 123 dwarves removed from the field would be something for the defenders to cling on to. Orcs champions and Drake broodlings. It's going to be mostly the Misty Mountains that are going to have to carry the day for the defenders here. They've got the damage dealers on their mounts, they've got the artillery piece. Functional front line is going to have to be the Rhovanion by the looks of it. High infantry moving in again, just a single unit being used to test things out. They'll easily beat the skirmishers in melee, of course, but there are a few of those slinger bullets ripping through the air. A little bit of damage. Saffron Warband moving up in support, perhaps. I suppose quite the devastating blow that I was expecting this to be honest. The more Isengard forces here. With the cavalry no longer in this position, of course, it does mean that Harad are free to open up another front, which is maybe a little bit of a problem. Potential benefit anyway, is the havoc that's being wrought against the dwarves. Potentially wrought anyway. Iron for pikes though. Plenty of very, very damaging units. Heavy goblin crossbows doing the business against them as well, so Erebor not having a great time of it at the moment, but surely with all of these resources being committed elsewhere, the attackers can take advantage over on this side. Yeah, catapults and burn. There was a quick setting alight of the artillery there from the Rhovanion. Yeah, the catapult has been active for so long in this battle, it's not really the end of the world, and they can be used now as melee fodder. You can hear the ripping of the Isengard ballista. 5 barrow whites. Again, that is a really devastating series of hits as well. That's something the defenders could scarcely afford. Pikes and axemen falling in droves. Heavy skirmishers. And after the Demons of the Desert, who already got a real good seeing to at the hands of the Goblin War Engine. But I think this is probably the most devastating short series that an artillery piece in this battle has had, which, I mean, considering how impactful it's been, is saying something. Isengard Ballista is one of the more reliable and still thoroughly damaging artillery pieces in the game. Mindful warriors are there. Mangonel going for a more direct hit. I mean, I think probably going for the arcing fire would have been the way to go if at all possible, just because you may hit your own units and send them fleeing, but you could also do the same to the enemy, and at this point I think those are the kinds of risks that you're probably going to have to be taking to stand any sort of chance as the defenders. Ooh, and the Witches now also getting involved, arcing their shots pretty significantly, so they won't be quite the tour de force that they could normally be, perhaps. One good hit from them is going to send a section of the line routing, and surely then it would be a matter of clean-up duty only. Misses, they have to be direct hits after all. Travel levy skirmishers fleeing. Ironically enough, actually getting in the way. Southron pikemen having to, well, I guess the risk reward was trying to get into the back so they could recharge the Harad infantry that is a more genuine threat, but surely with these pikes here, to be fair, the Warlords of Umbar have actually weathered that storm pretty well. The initial charge was not great for them with that charge reflection. Oh, you made it through, why are you leaving? Did the hard bit, got the reward, and then decided he didn't want it. Snow Trolls moving in. It's a good damage spike for the defenders in all fairness, but I don't know. Urukai Reavers are fleeing. Spearguard are not, however, and the Blackguard won't. Barrow White certainly won't. Dragonslayer's trackers moving forward, so I think the cavalry over on this side, the counter-offensive hasn't really come to too much, so the Dwarves able to put as much pressure as they can on now with their infantry and with both units of Dragonslayers on station. It's not the sort of force that can be taken lightly either. Weavers, slingers, drummers there as well. Fork spear guard. Friendly fire, maybe? It's not as devastating as it could be. I think they are going after, after the trolls, excuse me. Certainly big enough targets, but only one fell as a result of the green flames. Meanwhile, the Isengard Ballista, probably a bit of friendly fire there as well, to be fair, but continues to be an absolute menace. Still some good quality units here. I mean, it's fairly chaotic now, this fight, which tends to favour attackers, but the overall picture is still one of the attackers squeezing in on three sides. Trollman of Harad as well. I mean, just listing off these truly dangerous units, surely a sign that the defenders are living a charmed existence at this point. Champions of Nafrat, heavyweight clash against the Harbingers. Harbingers not really fancying that one though and deciding to leave. Trying to leave. I mean, there's nowhere really to leave to. Just trying to use its projectiles where it can, I suppose. Of the Dwarven force moving in here now as well in the ascendancy in all parts of the battlefield. Firing in, missing though. Mangonel, kind of the opposite really of the Isengard Ballista. It has probably the least reliability of any artillery piece in the game, other than, depending on what you're after, the Fletcher. To rely upon it in these situations for accurate shots is maybe not the greatest thing for you. Certain archers, more Isengard Berserkers, again another heavy hitting armor piercing unit. Very bad news for the remaining Rhovanion that are trying to make a fist of this. Again, arcing shots, not really devastating hits from the Witches this time around, to be fair. They have been getting hits, but it's more like individual soldiers that are perishing as a result of the fire. Urukai infantry on the path forwards as well. There goes the Angmar in general, finished off by the tribal berserkers. Again, another minor win in the midst of a major defeat for the defenders. Goblin War Engine now having to deal with cavalry as well, so the exploding barrels have been silenced for now. The pikes trudging their way uphill also. Slayers, trackers. There goes the Goblin General. That surely is going to be the bringer of the end of proceedings. That was a more devastating hit from the Witches for sure. Though with the conclusion of the battle already here, I don't think we can begrudge them that. Still arguing those shots away. Snow Trolls, will they be the last ones left standing? I don't know, considering the level of troops that are trying to finish them off. We've got the defenders trying to form up new lines. It's not going to work. Urukai infantry going to finish off the remaining Corsair crossbows. The War Engine routing. Pavilion not going to be playing host to any battles, I don't think, because the defenders are not going to have time to retreat to that point. Those trackers just throwing their projectiles at whatever they can see at this point, I guess. Mindful crossbows. Kingsguard in the fight. They'll last a little bit longer for sure. Drummers left their perch ultimately. Narskai in here as well. Yeah, having access to all that quality later on really did come in clutch for the attackers. They had more money per army, of course, in a 4v4 like this. And it means that their conservative play early on certainly did pay off for them. I think the key is always noticing when the battle is shifting in your favour and seizing the day, as it were, and Isengard and Angmar certainly did that. But from that point on, Erebor could continue to play the slow burn. Harad obviously spreading themselves out a little bit more. And yeah, I think definitely the right outcome here was an attacker win. I think from a defending perspective, they were too eager to play the game that the attackers wanted. I think the attackers clearly wanted to go to attack one unit, the slow approach early on. And if that's happening and you're getting on the wrong end of too many of those engagements, as the defenders, you need to rethink what you're doing, and it took them a little bit too long to do that, I think. So the right outcome. I don't know what's left at this point, to be honest. I guess the cavalry. Warlords of Umbar are going to be the last ones, perhaps. Getting hounded by the half-orc spears. It's over for them, surely. Going to try and get one last charge. They're going to try and go into the front of the Ironfoot pikes. I think they are. Or they're going to get... Well, no, they're not actually going to get caught by the Ironfoots, fair enough. Just in time, I think my voice is about to give way for the day. Troll. Wandering around in here, and there we go. The end. And I think definitely the right outcome here in this battle. So a big thank you to FFA Muffins for sending this one in. And a big thank you to all the players for being a part of this one. So yeah, like I said, I think the attackers, the early game plan to be conservative and then to move forward and just map control bit by bit, plateau by plateau, as it were. And they were able to execute well on that. I think for the defenders, of course, like we said, they didn't change tactic quickly enough. I don't think Rhun was too eager to get involved in exactly the kind of battle that Angmar wanted. It's always a little bit of a grey area because the artillery can really change things up. It may very well not have worked for Angmar in the end. But Isengard were able to make it work very nicely through the middle. And then over on this side, Erebor and Harad obviously going down multiple angles. Erebor having to take a slower approach, but again, they not a tiny army to be fair. But this situation, if they had moved in aggressively, they would have been wiped out by crossbows and artillery, the war engine and such. So it's always a little bit of a dangerous thing. Let's see what did the damage for Isengard. Nazkai did well when they were committed forward. The Isengard Ballista, all artillery pieces on the field today. Excuse me. All of the artillery pieces on the field today did very, very well, actually. All of them were able to get some good value. Some got a bit of friendly fire as well, but part and parcel of it, nature of the beast, etc. Champions of the White Hand did nicely as well. That's always good when a mounted unit is able to do so well in a siege. Half-Orc Baneguard was 0. That's a little bit weird, especially seeing as they took all those casualties, but must have been killed at range. And yeah, the standard Uruk-hai, obviously ever the reliable source of a front line. So yeah, big thank you to FFA Muffins once again. Big thanks to all the players once again for being a part of this battle replay. Got plenty of replays to be getting on with now. A couple in Silmarillion as well. So we'll see. I might do a couple instances of 2 videos a week if I can, but the situation being very busy at the moment means that is not entirely confirmed, but we'll see. Just to try and clear the backlog a little bit. Maybe do a couple of Silmarillion battles midweek if I am able. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me, whatever is next.